Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Olson with the National Tile Contractors Association. I want to welcome you and also thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend today's webinar. Today's webinar, Sound Advice, is sponsored and presented by Noble Company. Now, before I introduce today's speaker, I need to remind you that during the webinar, you'll be muted. Please use the questions area on your computer to type in your questions, and we'll answer those questions at the end of this presentation. If the audio on your computer is poor, please call the number on the invite to this webinar and listen on your phone. All of our webinars are available to watch at any time on the NTCA YouTube channel shortly after the webinars are presented, giving you easy access to watch all current and past programs at your convenience. All right, here we go. This is great. Today's speaker, Dean Marlin, Director of Architectural Services at Noble Company, is a Division 9 waterproofing, crack isolation, and permeation specialist who advises on some of the most demanding and prestigious projects in the United States. As a 30-year veteran of the tile industry, Dean's relationship with architects, builders, and owners allow him access to some of the most challenging and compelling design issues in the industry. Dean's extensive career on job sites gives him a real-world perspective, as he has seen firsthand success and failure relating to product selection, installation issues, and sequencing challenges. Dean, I'm looking forward to this. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Always great to be a part of your programs, and I hope things are going well up there in Minnesota. I was up there recently. I think spring has finally sprung, but thank you all for attending today. I know we're all pretty busy and we've all gotten used to webinars and Zoom meetings, and we thank you for making the time today to join us. So, sound advice, that's going to be on sound isolation, and it's a very important part of the building detail in many of our projects. This is an AIA approved session, meets all those guidelines and requirements. For those of you who are affiliated with IDCEC, this is also an approved session, and you will be able to get your credits upon the completion of this presentation. And the session description is a tad generic. I'll try to flesh it out to you for you. We're dealing with sound isolation. You know, you're typically on a condo project, home, multifamily, high-end hospitality, but you're trying to minimize the noise that people are going to hear on the floor below. So we're going to look at, you know, kind of the background of this part of the construction detail, some best practices, some standards, different product offerings out there. And by the way, there is a lot of new information. I was surprised as I was developing this presentation. There have been a lot of changes. So for you industry vets out there, I think you'll walk away with some new tools in your tool bag. For those of you who are just being exposed to this concept, a lot of good information to refer to. When we're done, of course, our goal is that you'll have useful information that you can use, whether you're an architect, distributor, contractor. You can use moving forward on projects requiring sound isolation. Okay, so we mentioned ceramic tile and natural stone with regard to sound isolation, but we're also seeing sound isolation used with luxury vinyl planking and hardwood floors, and even sheet vinyl or sheet good finished products on top of sound isolation substrates. There are more than a few ANSI and ASTM standards, but we'll try to keep those manageable. And of course, we always weigh in with the National Tile Contractors Association and the TCNA to get their perspective on this. You know, what you want to do is you want to avoid some of the shortcomings, misperceptions, misunderstandings about how this very important part of a tile and stone hard surface installation, how important some of these details are, okay? And so again, look at best practices, and we're going to look at some of these new testing procedures and standards because they have changed the landscape a little bit, okay? So what do we mean by sound isolation? I think one of the first things we need to get up and over is it is not soundproofing. And you'd be surprised at how many people, especially end users, you know, when they're being told that when they buy their upscale condominium or when they get their timeshare property, or sometimes we see this in higher end multi-story residential products, but it is not soundproofing, it is sound isolation. And the main concern for us is impact noise. And that can be the footfalls you hear above your head, someone dragging chairs across the floor, or it can be a kid banging balls. It can be your dog's toenails clacking across that hard surface porcelain tile or stone. There is some confusion sometimes because many of the sound isolation manufacturers will include a measurement called STC. We'll get into that more later, but that's relevant to noise. When I say noise, loud music, conversations we might hear from the next room or overhead, TVs blaring. We'll make this clear here at the development or start of this presentation. We're not really concerned about STC when we talk about what we need on our projects. And so if you see someone touting their fantastic STC performance capabilities, it's not really relevant. But we're trying to minimize the most intrusive of frequencies, and we'll identify those frequencies as we go on. I did want to make a special note here. I did have a well-respected independent acoustical consultant by the name of Tony Sola. He lives in the Phoenix area, and his company is ACS, Acoustical Consulting Services. He is an educator at ASU, has been for 20 years. By mentioning his name, I'm not touting his services over anybody else's, but I just want to say thank you to him. And at the end of the presentation, I'll give out his email address, his phone number. If you'd like to contact him, of course, if you ever need any kind of professional consulting services, I would advise that you avail yourself of several different sources to make sure you're getting the best independent information. But thank you, Tony Sola. He read this quite closely, and it was a great help. All right, so let's dig deeper into impact insulation class, IIC, okay? Now, this has been the coin of the realm for many years, and it's still relevant. And what it's doing is it's measuring through a very sophisticated means the level of intrusion caused by impact noise, okay? It's a logarithmic scale, which means it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, much like when you're measuring earthquakes, okay? Again, loud music, voices, TV blaring has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with IIC. That is STC, sound transmission class. Now, for someone who's been around for a while and have gotten involved with sound isolation products and some of the concepts and the standards, you'll probably remember the Uniform Building Code. And I put down here Uniform Building Code is a recommended 55. Now, for some of you, you'll think back and it used to be, well, gee, the bare minimum was 45, and that meant 45 translates to a 50 in the field. We'll get into that as we go along. Well, the UBC with regard to sound isolation concepts has been defunct for a while, and actually the International Building Code has taken its place, and that's been since the early 2000s. Now, I'll give you some numbers. They'll mean more as we go along, but the recommended performance levels by the International Building Code for IIC are 55 in the lab, 60 in the field. Those are pretty tough numbers to achieve. We'll tell you why as we go along. By the way, when you take a measurement IIC in a laboratory, and by the way, that's a laboratory controlled evaluation and test criteria. When you get it in the field, it's known as FIIC. And there are usually adjustments made because you're in the field, you're not in a lab. And now, in addition to that, we'll introduce some of these concepts as we go along. There's now HIIC, high frequency IIC, okay? And they all work together. They're not sole and separate. They kind of work together to give you a feel for how your product is doing. By the way, I feel it's important to note that whether you're in a laboratory or in the field, there are so many variables when it comes to sound isolation that if you had 10 exactly the same products tested in exactly the same way in the same kind of laboratories, they may be far flung across the US, but 10 different labs, you would get slightly different results. That's how sophisticated and vexing sometimes sound isolation can be, okay? Now, where do you use sound isolation? Condominiums is probably the first thing you think of. You know, vertical living, urban living, that can extend to some multifamily rental apartment scenarios. Hospitality, more and more we're seeing sound isolation used in hospitality, oftentimes in the drying areas of bathrooms, sometimes in, depending on the nature of that hospitality environment. Of course, codes can, we talked about the International Building Code, but realize individual cities, HOAs, there can be all different kinds of requirements that have to do with local jurisdictions, okay? So it's really important if you get involved with sound isolation that you be aware of what is needed for your project in your city, sometimes in your development, okay? We're also seeing sound isolation used in residential and custom home projects as well, okay? Now, where do you need sound isolation? Typically it's used wherever you have a hard surface. Ceramic tile, natural stone. Again, we're seeing luxury vinyl planking, hardwood floors, but and oftentimes wherever the architect calls out for it to be used in conjunction with a hard surface. Okay, now the challenge with identifying, is this the right sound ISO product or system for me, is real world conditions can vary greatly, okay? And so, you know, let's just say your product that you're using was tested with an 8-inch concrete slab, no ceiling below. Okay, great. But the project that's going on could be a 6-inch concrete slab, or it might be 6-inch concrete slab with a suspended ceiling. All these different variations are going to affect the performance of that sound isolation product, okay? So, and we see it can be very confusing, especially if you're not a sophisticated professional design person, and you just see numbers thrown at you. Well, our product gets a 55 IIC, and well, our product gets a 72 IIC, and numbers all over the map. Oftentimes, those numbers are based on wide variation of assembly. So very difficult when just using IIC to go, okay, yeah, that's great. That'll be just fine for my project. Okay, so what happened? By the way, forgive my shorthand, it should be ASTM E2179. What is that? It's more commonly referred to as the Delta rating, and this has been in play for a while now. It's used more prominently to reference a product's performance than IIC. In reality, they're all part of a whole, but what the Delta does is it examines just the performance of the product itself. So does it matter, is it a wood substrate with trusses and joists and suspended ceiling? Is it a hollow concrete slab? Is it 8 inches with a suspended ceiling and insulation? Doesn't matter. It's just measuring the performance of the product, okay? And then what happens is, let's just throw some numbers out. The delta of this product you want to use is a 12, okay? Great. Now, typically in construction, there are kind of generic delta ratings assigned to based on testing. What does your typical 8-inch concrete slab get? What does your typical 6-inch concrete slab, et cetera, et cetera? This could even extend to trusses and joists and wood frame systems, but they'll have a delta, an average delta. So you add A plus B. Let's just say you had a product that gets a 12, and you're using a substrate that gets a 41. Well, you add 41 to 12, you get a final number. Now, in the real world, this is my observation, we talked about the IBC and their recommended performance levels. In the years that I've been on a variety of field tests, most times if you can get in the low to mid 50s in the real world with a field test, you're going to be okay. When companies start promising really exorbitant numbers like guaranteed 55, guaranteed 60, be very cautious. That claim may be true, but it may require some very exacting details and methods that may not be relevant to your project, okay? Now, let's talk about HIIC. And why is it here today? Well, acoustic technicians, consultants, architects, manufacturers identified that the conventional IIC measurement, okay? And by the way, I'll throw some numbers out to you. You may see products test in the lab that could go from the high 40s to the low 50s to maybe the mid 50s. My friend Tony Sola and consultants said that there are systems out there that will get you to 60. There are not very many of them, okay? But typically your numbers in the lab, if someone's trying to have their product used on a project, will typically get the low to mid 50s, okay? That's if they're testing legitimately, okay? And by the way, I would always recommend when you are considering using a product that you get independent third-party testing from the laboratory. If you can combine that with some field testing, should get you a good feel for your product's value for you, okay? But anyway, back to HIIC. It was recognized that the conventional IIC sometimes took into account, too much so, things outside the area of concern to the floor assembly. It took into account the framing, the joist, other parts of the detail that don't really directly come in contact with the substrate and the flooring. And so HIIC pulls out the lower, and realize within the hearing spectrum, most of us can hear down to about 40, and it goes all the way up to 20,000. Now, maybe some young people and dogs can hear 20,000. Most humans, maybe 14, 15,000. And some of us who have played loud music and played in bands or just been exposed to a lot of construction noise, you may have your hearing beat down to 9, 10,000, okay? So what HIIC does is it takes what's known as the, relatively speaking, the higher frequencies, okay? Eliminates everything below 400 as not being relevant to the test, okay? It does include everything from 400 above to about 3150, okay? Now, that band of frequencies represents someone with hard heels, someone dragging furniture, your dog's toenails across a tile or stone floor, or dropping objects on a hard surface, okay? So the reason why it was put into play was, oh, there's my dog. Hey, we're still living in the pandemic, work at home environment, so all is safe with my dog. Okay, that would be STC, sound transmission class. Unless he's walking across your floor, then you hear his nails. That'd be part of HIIC. There you go, a living example. Anyway, IIC does not represent these higher frequencies like HIIC does, okay? So here's the good news. you can typically get a high frequency impact rating from the existing raft of testing done on a product, okay? And it allows, could be the architect, could be the consultant, might be an owner or a distributor or sales rep, architectural rep, who's going to say, okay, based on that, here's a type of floor topping product. That's a kind of a generic term for sound isolation material combined with a final flooring finish you want on your project, okay? HIIC does not replace IIC. It's in addition to, and I would caution you, I've already seen this, some people will just plug in the HIIC number and they'll eliminate the IIC number. Why? Because typically the HIIC number is higher. So if you're not dealing with a really knowledgeable or sophisticated reviewer of the information, they'll go, oh, look at that number. Wow, it's a 69 and everyone else is down here at 55. I better use that product. And it's not really ethically, it's not a good thing to represent your product in that manner, okay? As you can see in the big bold print here, high frequency ratings should be reported alongside other existing ratings like IIC, AIIC, which we haven't gotten to yet, but we're gonna, and of course the delta ratings, okay? And here is an example of what we talked about earlier, a couple of slides ago. When you take an HIIC reading, you're examining a much narrower band of frequencies, okay? And so the number is going to be a little bit higher. And you can see, looking at the chart and graphs and numbers and data, that in almost every case, and by the way, people do put sound isolation in showers sometimes. Definitely in wet areas, we're seeing more of that. But you can see it doesn't matter which area you put it in, typical living space, shower, stairs. The IIC number is significantly higher in every case, okay? Which is why it can't just be shown by itself. It's not a true representation of the overall performance, all right? Now, what's AIIC? That is a new, more comprehensive version of looking at field, FIIC, okay? It's just think of it as there was field IIC, and let's step one step back. What's field IIC? Well, you have your lab tests. That's great. Now you've gotten that product in the field. And sometimes, I would say most projects don't have a FIIC or AIIC standard protocol. Oh yeah, now we're going to test it in the field too. Usually it's only done, unfortunately, when someone is concerned about, oh gee, we're not getting the performance we wanted, or a condo owner files a complaint and a consultant has to be hired to test the product. But AIIC is FIIC having been retooled, retabulated, reformatted to a more accurate version. Okay, so all right. So where you may have seen FIIC in the past, new field testing will show AIIC. You want to know what that means? It's just a new version of field testing, okay? Which, by the way, doesn't make any previous FIIC data irrelevant. It's still relevant, okay? But moving forward, the new coin of the realm is AIIC. Those are used to test final installations with a variety of products in the field, okay? Now, let's take a look at some of the different types of products that are used for sound isolation. Now, again, it is typically an underlayment that goes between the finished floor surface and the substrate below, okay? Some of the things you want to look at is compressive strength of that underlayment. That can be a factor we'll talk about. You'll also want to look at some of the sound isolation membranes out there can provide performance characteristics above and beyond sound isolation. And here we see just kind of a typical quick and dirty detail here. There's your substrate. It looks like it could be concrete, Could be gypcrete, could be plywood, okay? You've got your sound control system, i.e. product, your tile bonding agent, and your tile or stone. And of course, we'll talk about this again, but you'll notice it's not butting up to a piece of code base. It's not butting up to the wall with a grout joint from a cementitious product. No, there is an acoustical sealant that's used at the perimeters, and we'll get into more of that later. Really important concept, okay? Now, oh, by the way, you know, the whole history of sound isolation really started to take hold late 60s, early 70s. You know, vertical living's been around for a while in major urban areas, but we started to see an explosion of higher end vertical living and more sophisticated tastes, and just moves away from shag carpet, okay? And as owners of condominiums, or even sometimes developers, weren't aware of these issues, as they moved away from carpeting to more resilient, durable surfaces, the complaints started to come in, okay? And so IIC as a measurement tool has been around since the 70s, okay? Where the whole sound isolation product marketplace and awareness really took hold was early to mid 90s, okay? And it's only increased since then. But back in those wild and woolly early days of sound isolation, cork was a big product used, okay? And there is some misperception, you know, it's a natural product. It comes from cork trees, okay? And because it's if you ever play with a cork in a bottle of wine, or the cork that's sometimes used, you know, you get a little bulletin board, you'll know that cork is somewhat soft and compressive, okay? It's got a pretty open cellular composition, so moisture can be easily retained in cork, and there could be some point loading compression issues, okay? But one thing you don't have to be concerned about is, amazingly enough, when you use cork, the cork tree itself is not permanently harvested or damaged. It's a self-healing, naturally reproducing program where cork is stripped off the tree. Over time, more cork grows where the cork was stripped off the tree, and you keep on going. So it's in terms of Mother Nature, the environment, all those things, you're not chopping down big forests of cork trees that are gone forever. In fact, this image to the right, that is the oldest living cork tree in the world. And they're still harvesting cork off it, okay? And of course, no waterproofing benefits with cork, and no crack isolation benefits I've seen really touted. Primarily there for minimizing, you know, essentially you're absorbing vibration, and vibration turns to sound, okay? Next up on our very popular product offering for sound isolation is Crumb Rubber. And literally it's made from ground up tires, which that certainly is a good thing. I mean, we're taking old tires, which are just a slightly very problematic environmental concern, grinding them up into little granules, and through modern manufacturing and composition and manufacturing techniques, they create a sheet of crumb rubber. And that crumb rubber is laid on the substrate. Typically, it's bonded to the substrate. And then the tile or stone or whatever's going on top of the crumb rubber is bonded to the crumb rubber. And again, by the way, crumb rubber is a pretty good sound isolation product, as is cork. Some of the concerns you have potentially with crumb rubber is it is a soft and compressive material. Okay, so point loading, compression could be an issue. You might want to get some test results, you know, the Robinson test, for example, to see if this could be an issue or not. Be careful when you're using crumb rubber. There are sometimes specialized adhesives that are required to bond that crumb rubber to the substrate and that tile bond to the cork or the crumb rubber rather, okay? Bituminous peel and stick products. Oh, by the way, let me back up. we have seen where some Crumb Rubber products are also touted for crack isolation, okay? Okay, bituminous asphaltic sheets, oftentimes called peel and stick. And these have been around for a while for sound isolation. They come in a variety of thicknesses, and the general concept is the thicker the bituminous asphaltic peel and stick product, the better sound isolation rating you get. But of course, you'll want to make sure a couple things happen when you have varying thicknesses of Crumb Rubber or varying thicknesses of cork or of peel and stick products. You need to make sure that whatever's tested and meets with your approval is actually what is installed on the job. Okay, we have seen situations where a little bit of bait and switch was done. We're not saying intentionally. Sometimes there could be honest confusion there, but you may have specified a Crumb Rubber, cork, or peel and stick product of a certain thickness, and what wound up on the project may have been half that thickness and was probably less expensive, and also probably did not perform to the levels you want. So please be aware, a little QA, QC in that area is pretty important, okay? Now, even though peel and stick, you know, when you look at planter boxes and below grade waterproofing, it has some uses for waterproofing in those applications. I have not seen peel and stick with regard to sound isolation be touted as a waterproof membrane as well, although it is touted as a crack isolation membrane. Some issues to be aware of is compressive strength. If you've ever held a piece of bituminous peel and stick in your hand, they're pretty soft and compressive. You want to make sure that whatever hard surface you're using on top of that peel and stick product, that there's been testing done, you know, typically Robinson testing, to identify its strength in those areas, okay? All right, there's a variety of thermoplastic sheet membranes. They might be PVC, they might be PE, they could be CPE, which is the highest performing thermoplastic. But again, they're an underlayment. They're going to be used on top of the substrate, and they're going to have the tile or the stone or the hardwood or the luxury vinyl planking go on top of that. By the way, while we talk about luxury vinyl planking, I think it can be generally acknowledged that that particular finished surface has made big inroads into the finished floor part of everyone's world, whether it's residential, commercial, hospitality, institutional. So the reason I bring that up is when you have a sheet good or a luxury vinyl plank per se, they will have different compressive strength than ceramic tile or natural stone. You'll want to make sure that if you're using luxury vinyl planking, that it's been tested with the sound isolation membrane you want to use to make sure there are no concerns about point loading or compression, okay? By the way, some of these sheet membrane thermoplastic sound isolation products do offer crack isolation and waterproofing, okay? As well as sound isolation. So, and this can be very relevant. I have been on projects where I've seen a very concerned architect or owner. I've seen them detail, okay, here's the crack isolation membrane. Then here's the sound isolation membrane. Oh, and here's the waterproof membrane. I've seen up to 3 membranes drawn on one floor. Now, obviously, if you can use one membrane to accomplish all 3, that would be of great advantage to all parties concerned in terms of cost, labor, quality of installation, etc. Okay. Brought up luxury vinyl planking or tile. Please make sure whatever kind of product you're going to use for sound isolation, it's been vetted with as far as point loading and compression, things of those nature. All right. And all of these goods, whether they're thermoplastic or a peel and stick, Crumb Rubber or cork, they're gonna come in a roll, okay? And varying widths, some come in 3 foot, some come in 4 foot, some come in 6 foot. So if that is important to you as far as production, how fast can this product be put down? You might want to check out the average width of the product you're going to use, as well as the bonding techniques. Do some of these require a primer? Is there a drying or curing process before you can get to work? There are some of these products out there will have no real curing or drying, which if you're trying to accelerate your schedule, it will impact maybe a selection of what you want to use. And again, here's just a typical detail. You see the concrete substrate. In this case, there is an adhesive, the bonds, the membrane, and then there's the most times a modified thin seg going on top of the sound isolation product. But make sure you check with the manufacturer to identify exactly what type of bonding agent should be used. Of course, you see in this example, there is a saw cut joint. Again, if crack isolation is a concern to you, you might want to see what the performance properties of that sound isomembrane are. If it does have crack isolation, of course, somewhat related to that, the compressive strength, okay? Moving on to a couple other different types of sound isolation. If you look at foam, expanded polystyrene, EPS, you have your styrofoam coffee cup, or the expensive cooler at the convenience store. Those little granules of EPS foam are bonded together with adhesive, and they're run through a press, and they create a lightweight sheet, which is used as the sound isolation product. Recycled cloth fiber is used and compressed and bonded into a mat, a sheet, and that is used as a sound isolation product. Again, make sure that's going to be compatible with whatever final flooring surface you're going to use. Okay, there are a number of trowel applied products out there. They come in a bag and are mixed on site, and when they're troweled out, provide a certain level of sound isolation performance. Now, you may see different examples of different manufacturers' products. They are for illustrative concerns only. I am not touting any one system or product. They're just to illustrate the type of product used in the industry, okay? So what gets used over sound isolation? Well, ceramic tile and natural stone probably most often. We do see a fair amount of hardwood, usually glue down hardwood. Talked about luxury vinyl planking or tile. Again, a little repetition here, primarily residential, condominium, multifamily. We're seeing more and more student housing using it because in terms of just the aesthetics and quality of life, you've got multi-floor student housing, and you've got durable hard surfaces, sometimes tile, sometimes luxury vinyl planking. It's going to cause a certain amount of impact noise. So we are seeing sound isolation specified for student dorms, okay? And certain hospitality applications, I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. I can tell you there are several projects here in town that are hotels on the Strip. And because some of these hotels they're the hybrid, they're hotel condos, okay? Well, for that reason, hundreds of thousands of square feet can be used in a hospitality scenario to minimize those intrusive frequencies, okay? All right, so ANSI A118.13 is the standard for bonded sound reduction membranes, okay? And it references, ASTM E2179, that's the delta, and then E492, that's the Robinson test, and the tap test. I'm sorry, that's a tap test. For crack isolation, ANSI A118.12, that's a good standard to reference. By the way, for those who don't know it, there's a standard performance level, 1/16 of an inch, high performance, 1/8 of an inch. And there are some sound iso products that have no identifiable measured crack isolation whatsoever. It's up to you to decide whether that's important to you or not. Of course, C627 deals with the Robinson test. Sorry about that confusion. But these all may play into your final decision on what am I going to use for sound isolation, okay? This is a tapping machine. It's not a guy walking around, tapping the floor. And I'm sure you've seen some of this anecdotal type of tapping where someone's got a steel rod, or they'll bounce a golf ball, or whatever they do to see if a floor sounds hollow or if it's making noise on the floor unit below. This is a very standardized testing protocol, okay? And what's going to happen is the consultant is going to set, whether it's the lab or it's the field, they'll set it up on a floor. They'll put a certain quality and type of microphone located at certain predetermined distances, and they will capture the sound that comes through the floor assembly, and they will take that information. It'll be converted to binary code, a digital form, and you'll get a readout, which will measure the performance of that assembly, okay? Again, worth repeating. And I say it's worth repeating because we do from time to time see, and I'm not gonna say it's intentional or unintentional, but if someone comes to you and says, I've got this great sound isolation product, you should be using it in all your projects on the floor, it gets this really just out of this world STC rating. It really has no relevance to what you want from a Division 9300 ceramic tile installation. And most sound ISO products from the tile and stone world don't offer much STC performance. If they do, they're just not relevant to why you'd select it. Talk about IIC, that's sort of the starting point, and how that's morphed into HIIC and AIIC to further refine the results of what you get from testing, okay? Now, performance and cost variables. Well, what do you want that product to do? There's a wide range of products, a wide range of costs. Again, look at compression. Why is that important? I have been on projects here in Las Vegas where brand new construction, not even open to the public, was using a sound isolation product that could be a variety of circumstances, but there was issues with compression, point loading, grout joints cracking out, cracked tile, okay? Crack isolation. That may be something you want on your project. Waterproofing. Oftentimes you see sound isolation in the laundry rooms, in the kitchen, bathrooms. There are sinks, toilets, washing machines, kitchen sinks. They can all overflow. And so if you have a sound iso membrane that provides waterproofing, that literally killed two birds with one stone. And here's an example of what a floor looks like when, of course, slightly, I won't say it always looks quite this bad, but you can see where there has just been a large area of the substrate beneath it has not supported it looks like a natural stone on top of its setting bed, okay? So may not be this dramatic, but it may just be a cracked grout joint, but even after a while, cracked grout joints powder out and cause their own problems. So please factor that into your final selection process. Again, the same thing can happen with luxury vinyl planking, hardwood surfaces. Oftentimes this might have more to do with the actual compressive strength of the floor finish, but if you've got a product that is realizing unacceptable levels of point loading and compression due to the substrate below, whether it's tile, stone, or luxury vinyl planking, you probably have some ongoing installation and durability issues. All right, so let's look, and we'll try to speed this thing up. We're getting down the home stretch. Who are the customers for sound isolation? Well, architects, condo owners, condo associations, distributors, installers. If you're an architect, you want to know what's the building code in my town, in this development, in the city. Uniform building code's gone away. The numbers by International Construction Code, or building code rather. They're talking about 55 and 60 as being numbers a little hard to reach, but they can get there. And what does your project require? Okay, and what does the owner or architect require from the system? The remodeling or new construction, and be very careful. HOAs oftentimes have a really high numbers to reach. I'll tell you why. It took me a long time to realize this. they say, well, if you buy the condo and you want to take the carpet out, you want to put in tile or stone, it's got to be a 60 or 65, and you need to hire a consultant. Well, they know that number is hard to achieve, and they, quite frankly, don't want to have the floors replaced with something that's a hard surface, because that's when the complaints start, okay? So, and oftentimes these numbers are unrealistic, but please be aware, before you tear everything out of your condo or your apartment or wherever you live, make sure that that's going to be allowable and that what you put in is going to be approved. If you're an installer, it's probably, at the end of the day, the ANSI standards say once you approve the substrate, once you install over it, you own it. So you might want to know what, gosh, I'm doing sound isolation in this $4.5 million condominium project. What are the code requirements? What's the HOA saying? And how was this building built? And is the product I'm picking out or the product I'm installing, is that based on a price request or a performance request? And if you're a distributor, I think a big challenge these days is to have your counter people and your sales staff knowledgeable, but you don't want to be, when the class action lawsuit starts and they bought it from your distribution company and they say, well, your sales rep said it would do this and that. And does that happen? I will tell you today, talking to Tony Solo, he gave me a very graphic example of how a well-intentioned salesperson gave some really inaccurate information to an architect, and it got into the building documents, got into the construction documents, and took a lot to unfold. So if you're a distributor, it probably would serve you well to be really aware of these different components to sound isolation and what these test standards mean. A little knowledge can be very helpful in the long run, and also you'll be of more value to your architectural client, your contractor client, and the owner. All right. Of course, the Tile Council of North America Handbook. Here's the brand new shiny 2021 cover. I think this is shipping as we speak, and I always look forward to getting my new copy. I think there'll be some changes this year we'll take a look at, but there's a whole section in this handbook, this manual, about sound isolation, okay? Please take the time to look at it. You don't want installation issues, which we'll get to real quickly here, flanking noise. Real simply put, your sound isolation is an island, okay? You can't have grout. You can't have the tile touching the wall. You can't have cove base touching the tile. If that happens, those vibrations make contact with the wall, going up and down the unit. You've got flanking noise that can lead to a failure. If you're putting in after the fact anchor points or metal penetrations, anything that goes through the flooring and or the sound isolation, that's a new conductor of vibrations that will most likely cause flanking noise and a failure. If you did this, it's going to be on you, by the way. Think about some of the pipes that may run maybe close to the wall, that may run from unit to unit. Think of the fireplace in the middle of the room. When you're tiling up to that, when you're putting your sound isolation down, no hard surface can touch that fireplace, those fireplace walls, those pipes. It's got to be soft jointed. It might be a certain acoustical foam or acoustical sealant, but you can't have tile, you can't have grout, you can't have thin set touching those penetrations, those vertical spaces, because it will cause flanking noise and a failure. When you look at test results, please be cautious. Look at, are they independent third-party tests? Are they being tested the correct way? Is it a field test? Is it a lab test? The devil's in the details, and with sound isolation, you don't need a condo full of unhappy owners coming back on your firm, whether it's an installation firm, design firm, or a distribution firm. Dig beneath the test bullet points, third-party testing. Don't ask the product to do more than it's intended. That's oftentimes the source of failure in installations. You just, you're trying to ask a really reliable horse that can, plow the fields to run the Kentucky Derby. It ain't going to happen, okay? So, is there a best sound isolation membrane? I would say there are a lot of very good products out there. There are more and more new innovations coming out But you know, I guess if you can find a product out there that will give you the crack isolation and compressive strength you need, can provide crack isolation at a high level of performance, and give you waterproofing, well, that's the trifecta. Do you have to have all three to have effective sound isolation? No, you don't. You just have very good sound isolation, but realize you may have to have an additional membrane for crack isolation and waterproofing on top of that, okay? Most of these products are part of a system, so please use the entire system. Use the recommended adhesive. Make sure you use the recommended, if it's an acoustical sealant, please use that. Don't go down to the local Home Depot or Lowe's or buy some 99-cent, you know, on sale product and pretend that's going to be your acoustic sealant. If you're waterproofing, make sure you follow all the correct waterproofing practices. Use the correct sealants as well. It's all part of a successful system. Of course, most importantly, you can have the best product in the world, but you have to have really good labor. I'm very proud to say that a Noble company, as well as most major manufacturers, we advocate for qualified labor. There's a lot being done by a lot of organizations. You'll see some of them at the bottom of your screen here that are doing on a daily level, are making sure you get the type of quality you want on your projects. Of course, Master Specs is a great source to start there. And I hear the whole chicken and the egg, which came first? Well, look, I can guarantee you, as manufacturers, we're going to our contractors saying, look, the architects we work with are putting this language in their documents. You better get up to speed, better get trained, or you're not going to be able to get on that job in the near future, okay? Spec Link is also a good source of this language as well. BSD Spec Link, a lot of you use that. Here's some of the formats being looked at: large format tile, of course, membranes, that would be sound isolation membranes, and a host of other very relevant, very timely, very needed areas of expertise. Again, the groups down below: ACT, CTEF, NTCA. It's the alphabet soup of organizations that are really working hard to make sure we have qualified labor available for your projects. One more look at the email addresses. If for some reason you need this information, contact the NTCA, contact Noble Company. We'd be happy to forward that information to you. And I think I have a few minutes left for a couple of questions. Thank you very much. Just realize a lot of new information out there.
Dean, great job. Hey, before I even start asking you questions, we do have a few. Your presentation was great, but I want everybody to know here, if you're looking for an AIA or an IDCEC CEU for this program, please look at your chat screen. You can send your requests into Dean, if you see Dean at noblecompany.com, or Tony, T-O-N-I, at noblecompany.com. They'll make sure that you get your credit, your CEU. So want to make sure you know that. Dean, this was great. Lots of great information. I have quite a few questions here. Let's get started. Do you have any feedback using MacGo board in lieu of Gypcrete?
It's funny, there are a variety of new systems out there besides lightweight Gypcrete that are being used for sound isolation. I would say the best thing you can do is, I would ask that manufacturer for they should have, if they're purporting themselves to be an effective sound isolation system, they should have all the data on board, third-party test results. I haven't heard of that particular product myself. It doesn't mean it's, that just means maybe I haven't heard of them, but if they're a legitimate means of solving this request, make sure you have adequate sound isolation. They should have all the information you need on board to support that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Does the delta of the product change when it is tested in different assemblies, such as on wood, concrete, or in suspended ceiling involved, or is the delta always the same?
Great question. The delta is going to be the delta where that is identifying just that product. So that's the beauty of it. Whether you put it over lightweight Gypcrete, OSB, a concrete slab, the delta is going to be the delta. So you need to identify the what is the recognized performance of the substrate beneath it, and that information is available. But concrete. So you add those two numbers together to get the number that's close to what you want.
Perfect. Are there any HIIC code requirements?
No, in fact, the HIIC really was driven by manufacturers because they wanted to have a more accurate look at how their product did, independent of the assembly beneath it. So all HIIC is doing is again, it's identifying at the higher frequencies how well it performs. HIIC should not ever be used as an independent sole source of saying, okay, gee, it has a great HIIC number, I'm going to use it. It's used in conjunction with the other available IIC and AIIC numbers and delta. It all forms a whole. It helps you make your decision.
Great. This next question, I do have to say, Noble has a whole room set up for this, and it's how is the actual IIC test conducted?
Great question. Whether it's in the, we touched briefly on this. If it's in a lab, they are very, very rigid. I mean, we have a sound test lab set up at our home office. We're one of the few companies that does. But I mean, it is very exacting. I mean, essentially, you're just sucking sound out of the space, and then there are algorithms. There are very demanding test criteria, measurement devices, standard formulas across the board, industry wide. And then you take that in the field. You saw that tapping machine. They take that same protocol and they bring it to the field. The one thing I'll caution you, if you go into the field, I want you to think about is are the doors or windows open in the building you're testing? There's lots of things that it can influence, pass or fail. So if you get in the field to test your product, really do your due diligence to make sure you get hopefully the results you want and need.
Great. I hope you can answer this one. We'd have to go back and look at the slide. I don't know which slide it is, but in the slide showing the layers on the floor, what type of layer was under the sound isolation material over the substrate?
Well, okay, there was, I'm thinking of the slide, you had the concrete substrate, you had the sound isolation membrane, and that's typically bonded, it's not typically loose. You then had your adhesive on top of the sound isolation membrane, and then your tile, stone, hardwood, etc. That's my recollection. You okay. May have had, yeah, adhesives to bond the sound iso membrane, but that would be the natural order of things on your typical detail.
All right, Stefan Kromkowski and Sin Kwang Chen, please send your AIA number to the two email addresses we have. If you look on the screen, you'll see dean@noblecompany.com. The other is Tony@noblecompany.com, and Tony is spelled T-O-N-I, and they will definitely get you your credit. Let's see here what else we got.
Good questions, by the way. Good questions.
Yeah, Francis Prince, the same goes for you. Please send your request in on those two email addresses. Thank you. Let's see what else we got here. All right. All right, we've got a lot of people. They're interested in getting their Grant Rogers. Do the same, please. Please go and send your request in to either Dean or Tony. And I guess I just deleted the last question accidentally. So, Dean,
okay.
Dean, we're good to go. But I want everyone to know. Look here. Here's Dean's phone number. Here's Dean's email address. I will tell you, I've known Dean for 15 years, 12, 15 years, and he'll be there for you. If you want to call him, if he's busy, he'll get back to you. He'll answer all your questions on pretty much any membrane, but especially for this situation and sound deadening. And it's really interesting. It's been around a long time, and it's come a long way. So, Dean, I want to thank you. You did. Oh, what do we got here? I think I got the question was asked again. How has LEED prerequisites for noise control for schools and healthcare facilities influenced product development?
Okay, I heard a couple letters. What at the start of that question?
I wish I would have deleted it. How has the requirement for hospitals and schools for sound control changed the industry?
Well, I mean, as time has gone on, I mean, what's happened is there's a growing sophistication and demand on a variety, on a healthcare level. People, healthcare professionals realize if their patients can recoup and get better in an environment that is quiet and is free from, jarring impact noises, loud voices, or noises from the next room, that's only going to benefit them. And on a residential real life level for you and I mean, people are just more sophisticated. If they've grown more accustomed to having an environment that's going to be pleasant to be in, and so towards that end, they're just going to require that the person above them put a sound isolation membrane that eliminates those intrusive frequencies. So, and by the way, you're only going to see more and more of that as our world changes and more and more of us live in a vertical world. You'll see more and more stringent demands in those areas.
All right. Well, Dean and everybody, I want to thank you all for being here. Dean, what a great presentation. Amazing information that people are going to be able to use as we move forward in the future here and everything we do. So thank you for your time. Everybody, thank you for your time. I want to thank you all and keep in touch. Our next webinar, the invites will be coming out later this week or the first part of next week, and we're excited for all of you to attend. Thank you very much. All right.
Have a great day.
Stay safe. Bye-bye. See you.
Bye.